All right, let's do a final really quick segment. This is something I want to talk about because this actually relates to hegemony, and then we'll take a final Discord question. Gramsci is somebody we're going to be talking about a lot more. I want to talk about movements and things that have worked from across the globe, leaders that are inspiring, and I also want to talk about concepts that I think actually really are in our lives. Now, hegemony is a word that is, I think it's kind of been used into sort of irrelevance in a way. But the idea that capitalism as a practice reproduces itself through the kind of day-to-day consent of people, as mediated through institutions, as mediated through cultural networks and ideas that naturalize capitalism. I know it sounds really wordy. I wish I could make it sound simpler. But first of all, does that sound about right, guys, from your reading of hegemony? Does that sound about right?
Yeah, it's like hegemony. There's multiple different hegemonies in society, and you think about it more as like a liquid. Like this is a way that, like this is a abstract way of trying to hit at it that one of my philosophy professors taught me that I thought made it very clear. If you think about like a cup just filled with water and you add milk to it, right, that changes the consistency of like the liquid itself, right? It doesn't make it all milk. It's like a mixture of water and milk. Then you add dye, and that turns it red, right? Like all of these things are coming into this one vessel, which is society, and there's all these different hegemonies, and then the dominant hegemony, which is like capitalism, is the dominant in our society. So even though it has different venues, for example, like in the church, in the schools, right, all these have their own ideologies, and certain groups are empowering them, there's still one dominant hegemony, and that is sort of like the battle in society, the kind of different.
And the mediating institution, I just want to really focus on this part of it, that the mediating institutions are what. So, okay, let's take prosperity gospel. That clearly flows from capitalism. But the mediating institution of the preacher who's telling you how to pray and be rich is what naturalizes the people going to that church to be sort of move into the capitalist hegemonic orbit, right? Does that make sense? So, and this clip of Cornel West from the early 90s where he talks about this in relation to the left in the black church could be an example of, and also this is another key Gramscian term, that organic intellectuals, people who mediate ideas and institutions but are not trained. They're not to the manner born. They're not, they're not Davos intellectuals. They're not on CNN, but they're working with ideas usually in different institutions and to kind of do a counter-hegemonic project. I just want to play this clip real quick.
Cornel West talks about popular Gramsciism.
Thinking about Gramsci and America, and Gramsci and the world, we have to come to terms with a fundamental theme that informs all of Gramsci's work, which is that of the popular creative spirit. Raise the question of what he means by this term. And I think that you have seen some of this at work in people's creative efforts, in people's agency, making and remaking themselves and making and remaking the society and world around them. Of course, in the black tradition here in America, we see that kind of cultural agency at work within the church. You've already seen that. But we also see how it is inseparable from political struggle, inseparable from social activism.
So I hope those themes are kind of working there. And I really believe this is a much deeper concept to explain why people are afraid of change and why even when look, it's cool that you go and you poll people and they say they like a particular policy idea, but when they go into that booth and they actually make that decision about what they think is safe to beat Donald Trump or deal with a crisis, it's all the things that we're talking about. All the Democratic Party aligning and giving that affirmation to Biden. That's a powerful hegemonic act. And it is almost kinesthetic. And I think folks this is why people react when you challenge capitalism. This is why people react when you challenge wokeness. This is why people react when you challenge scientism. This is why people react when they challenge their religious fanaticism. It's in the core, and we need to figure out to interact in a way to actually dislodge it. And this is one of those things that it sounds so abstract, and I almost can't stand myself while I talk like this, but if I'm making even 1/5 of sense here, this is actually the type of work that is going to be necessary for even creating the space and the context for a Labor Party, for the projects we're talking about. So I don't know if you have anything to add. I hope I hope it made some sense.
It makes me think about another person that we've been visiting a lot is Zizek. Zizek has in Sublime Object of Ideology, which a lot of people are familiar with his later stuff and obviously his interviews, but that's one of Zizek's real brilliant masterworks of philosophy, and where he actually made a dent and changed the way that people were thinking. And he does Marx basically said ideology was it's that you do and you don't really know why you're doing it, right? Well, Zizek actually flipped that for our age today, where he said, actually, they know exactly what they're doing and they're doing it anyway. Right. And it's actually, and that's what happens when you see people who are going for blind, well, I don't think this is actually going to change anything. There's no real possibility of anything, but this is what we have to do. Right. That's very strong ideology. And that's actually the kind of ideological age that we're living in. It's not enough just to actually tell people that it's oh, this is just what they want you to do. They're well, yeah, I know. And I'm still doing it. That's the task. And it's difficult to get out of that mindset and to practice politics. I mean, this is capitalist realism that Mark Fisher, all these things are connected, and the ideology question is one that really smart people like Gramsci and Cornel West and Zizek and Mark Fisher have been working on for a long time, and we still haven't found that kind of perfect popular formula to deal with it. But it's something it's something we can't ignore anymore, honestly.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that it's another paradox, right? That we urgently need action for human survival, not to mention flourishing and basic decency. But I'm also afraid that if we don't really start to think and embody, then we're just going to keep replicating. It's kind of okay, the car isn't working. Hit the gas. Well, not if the engine's fucked up. So I want to create space in this show, and we'll make it fun, we'll make it entertaining. And of course we're going to talk about the election. Of course we're going to, be more global than ever. But the context that I'm trying and we're trying to call upon here is, how do we actually figure out these predicaments? And then from them generate better ideas, better ways of being, and actually win. You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.